Let's spend a little bit of time talking about the ongoing Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro. Is it a conflict? I mean, not compared to a nuclear war. It's a storm in a teacup compared to that. But Tucker on Joe Rogan made some remarks about the use of the atomic bomb. Let's have a look at that first of all to kick us off.
Well, you could say the same about the atomic bomb, right?
Yes, you could.
And you could say that we have to develop it like Oppenheimer felt before the Nazis did.
I love that. How'd that work? How'd that work?
Well,
I love, by the way, that people on my side, I'll just admit it, on the right, have spent the last 80 years defending dropping nuclear weapons on civilians. Like, are you joking?
Right.
That's just like prima facie evil.
Yeah.
If you can't, if we hadn't done that, then this, that, the other thing, that was actually a great savings. Like, no, it's wrong to drop nuclear weapons on people. And if you find yourself arguing that it's a good thing to drop nuclear weapons on people, then you are evil. Like, it's not a tough one, right? It's not a hard call for you. It's not a hard call for me. So with that in mind, like, why would you want nuclear weapons? It's like just a mindless, childish sort of intellectual exercise to justify, like, oh no, it's really good because someone else will get it. How about no? How about like spending all of your effort to prevent this from happening? Would you kill baby Hitler, famously?
Right.
Baby Hitler hadn't actually done anything wrong, so it's out of order, really. How would you explain it? What are you doing to that baby? Well, no, now, come on. Like, people will start using that as an excuse to kill other babies.
So I don't know why we're sitting back and allowing this to happen if we really believe it will extinguish the human race or enslave the human race. Like, how can that be good?
Okay, so the way Tucker Carlson puts it, pretty difficult to disagree with that. Let's have a look at what Ben Shapiro's saying. I guess he responded to Tucker's, in my view, pretty reasonable claim that nuclear bombs are, like, I guess what they continually say, I suppose, and I've not seen Ben's take yet, is that without the nuclear war, there would have been a greater loss of life. But let's unpack that a little.
When it comes to isolationism, as we've discussed, there are a bunch of different perspectives within the isolationist perspective. There is the we should not get involved in foreign conflicts no matter what perspective because we need the money here at home, which means that you're also in favor of cutting spending by the government on a wide variety of other subjects. There's also an isolationism that suggests that whenever America gets involved in foreign conflicts, that tends to taint the United States, not it's about the United States tainting the rest of the world. But there is a theory that has now arisen on the right that there is something deeply malign about the United States, something deeply wrong with the United States. Most people on the conservative side of the aisle tend to believe that America is a force for good in the world. And as we'll discuss, it turns out that dropping the atomic bomb on Japan was necessary for ending World War II and likely saved millions of lives, both American and Japanese. Why are we talking about how many lives it would save? It's just wrong to drop the bomb. Well, no, actually. If you end up saving more lives than are cost by the dropping of the atomic bomb, then it is morally justified to drop the atomic bomb. And that happens to be the reality of the situation.
It's quite a hard argument to make because then you'd have to sort of work out what the life versus life metric was, as if there could be a sort of a stock exchange of lives or a foreign exchange of life. This life is worth more than this life. I think once you're in the territory of dropping nuclear bombs, it's hard to make any moral argument. That's my personal position, which I'd happily, of course, pursue with Ben Shapiro. I've been on Ben's shows and he's kindly ordained to be on this show. In this particular instance, I'm ardently against the use of nuclear missiles. And my perspective on isolationism is this: subsidiarity. The closer power is to the people affected by it, the less likely it is there will be conflict of this scale. Because even though, as long as there have been people, there has been conflict, what we have an opportunity for now are new forms of confederacy, new forms of alliance, new forms of decentralization, new forms of anti-establishment politics that bakes in the idea that whilst you culturally run your community in this way, we run our community culturally in this way. And what you do over there is none of our business, and what we do over here is none of our business. And perhaps you might embed some, what you might casually call universal principles around murder, violence, et al. We can't continue to bring you this beautiful content without the support of our partners. The Wellness Company are some of my favourite partners. Will your doctor even prescribe you ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine? Hey, I did it. The Wellness Company's prescription contagion emergency kit is unique, providing carefully selected effective medications for COVID-19 and respiratory illnesses. Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, which some people call HCQ, don't know why, Z-Pack, and butanide, along with a nebulizer and guidebook for safe use. Do not muck around with a nebulizer. This is, of course, backed by research and endorsed by experts, specifically Dr. Peter McCulloch and Dr. Harvey Rich, both friends of the show. Avoid the chaos, wait times, and price of the hospital. Get the entire kit for the cost of a single doctor's visit. This is only available in the USA. Every American home should have one of these, don't you think? Visit twc.health/brand and use our code BRAND to save $30 plus get free shipping on your contagion kit. Okay, back to the content. Now let's have a look at how the Oppenheimer argument and dilemma actually played out. What was really created when Nagasaki and Hiroshima were bombed? Was it ultimately one of the most profitable industries the world has ever seen? Was this, in fact, the keystone of the military-industrial complex? Let's have a look. A 2022 report by Ira Hefland and International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War estimated that a limited nuclear war between India and Pakistan that used roughly 3% of the world's 12,000 plus nuclear warheads would kill hundreds of thousands of millions, perhaps even billions of us. A full-scale nuclear war between the United States and Russia, the study suggests, could kill up to 5 billion people within 2 years, essentially ending life as we know it in a nuclear winter. Also largely ignored are the critical voices who argued that there was no need to drop a bomb, no less 2 of them, on Japan, most of whose cities had already been devastated by US firebombing to end the war. Of course, I'm well aware that the British caused unimaginable incendiary damage to Dresden because of what was a retaliatory strike rather than a military one, and I believe that that was also wrong. When you're discussing principles, I suppose, from a truly ethical position, you wouldn't need to know the character or nature of the individual. The principle would apply whether it was Britain bombing Dresden or America bombing Hiroshima or Russia bombing Ukraine. You would just say, well, I'm against that. It doesn't matter. I don't need to know which nations or individuals are involved. I have a principle around that. General Eisenhower wrote that when he was told by Secretary of War Henry Stinson of the plan to drop atomic bombs on populated areas in Japan, I voiced to him my grave misgivings, first on the basis of my belief that Japan was already defeated and that dropping the bomb was completely unnecessary. Okay, so I suppose the argument, according to Eisenhower, who was a president and a significant general, the idea that Japan would somehow galvanize an ongoing Second World War, at least by his reckoning, is bogus. The film also failed to address, they're talking about Oppenheimer, the health impacts of the research, testing and production of such weaponry, which to this day is still causing disease and death, even without another nuclear weapon being used in war. Victims of nuclear weapons development include people who were impacted by the fallout from US nuclear testing in the western United States and the Marshall Islands in the western Pacific, uranium miners on the Navajo lands, and many others. Speaking of the first nuclear test in Los Alamos, New Mexico, Tina Corvoda of the Tularosa Basin Downwinders Consortium, which represents that state's residents who suffered widespread cancers and high rates of infant mortality caused by radiation from that explosion, said, "It's an inconvenient truth. People just don't want to reflect on the fact that American citizens were bombed at Trinity." Another crucially important issue has received almost no attention. Neither the film nor the discussion sparked by it has explored one of the most important reasons for the continued existence of nuclear weapons: the profits it yields the participants in America's massive nuclear industrial complex. Once Oppenheimer and other concerned scientists and policymakers failed to convince the Truman administration to simply close Los Alamos and place nuclear weapons and the materials needed to development under international control, the only way, as they saw it, to head off a nuclear arms race with the Soviet Union, the drive to expand the nuclear weapons complex was on. Research and production of nuclear warheads and nuclear-armed bombers, missiles, and submarines quickly became a big nuisance whose beneficiaries have worked doggedly to limit any efforts at the reduction or elimination of nuclear arms. According to nuclear expert Stephen Schwartz, author of Atomic Audit, the seminal work on the financing of US nuclear weapons programs through the end of 1945, the Manhattan Project cost nearly $38 billion in today's money while helping spawn an enterprise that has since cost taxpayers an almost unimaginable $12 trillion for nuclear weapons and related programs. That's 6 Afghanistan's worth of nuclear weapons when there's not even been a nuclear war. That's pretty crazy. And the cost never ends. Nobel Prize-winning international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons reports that the US spent $43.7 billion on nuclear weapons last year alone, and a new Congressional Budget Office report suggests that another $756 billion will go into deadly armaments in the next decade. Private contractors now run the nuclear warhead complex and build nuclear delivery vehicles. They range from Raytheon, General Dynamics, and Lockheed Martin, to lesser-known firms like BWX Technologies and Jacobs Engineering, all of which split billions of dollars in contracts from the Pentagon for the production of nuclear delivery vehicles and the Department of Energy for nuclear warheads. And such beneficiaries of the nuclear weapons industry are far from silent when it comes to debating the future of nuclear spending and policy making. Northrop Grumman and its 12 major ICBM subcontractors have been busy pushing the Sentinel as well. They spend tens of millions of dollars on campaign contributions and lobbying annually, while employing former members of the government's nuclear establishment to make their case to Congress and the executive branch. So it seems pretty clear on that basis that nuclear arms and nuclear armament is just another aspect of the military-industrial complex, and the key beneficiaries of nuclear armaments and nuclear missiles and the industry that surrounds it is the same military-industrial complex that appears to have undue, incredible influence over American political life, geopolitics, escalating wars across the world, endless conflicts, all funded by American taxpayers and taxpayers elsewhere. Surely the day must be at hand where we call ourselves to reason, where we awaken with ourselves that which is beyond reason, love, service, and the possibility of genuine change that is unlikely to be delivered to us through the conduits of bellicosity that we are currently affording perhaps a little too much time and space. Let us freely advocate for peace. Let us learn from Bishop Mari Emanuel that forgiveness, transparency, clarity, and love remain the answers. And in this spirit, I salute you and love you all. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.